How long you been in the U.S. this time around? I know
About
you
a-
were just in Costa Rica, but
Yeah, about a week.
about a week. How long
Yeah.
will you be here?
Another 2 weeks.
How's it being back?
It's it's actually it feels very different. So the last time I was in the States was Q3 last year, and things were very uncertain. People were at each other's throats because we're going into the election, and coming back, it feels. I know there's it depends on where you are and what circles you're running in, but it feels like there's a little bit more optimism in this country than there was before.
It's the party of joy now.
Well, I don't know about that, but so it feels. But you know what it feels like? It feels like people. The chilling effect, right? When you don't feel like you can say something because you'll get in trouble.
Yeah.
It feels like the pendulum is swinging back the other way, and people can talk more now and can voice their opinions differently, and that there's opportunity for growth and something to happen.
Yeah.
Where I think people had this chilling effect. There's a feeling of stagnation, and I was so I'm pleasantly surprised by that. And by the way, I will just go on record here as saying I grew up in Africa, in South Sudan, Sudan proper now, in Khartoum, in Kenya, and I grew up around all these aid projects, right, that are 90% failure rates. To see USAID get funding pulled is very harmful for some of my friends in Africa. But by God, it's useless, right? And I am really hoping that this brings some change, because I'm not saying that there's no aid needed. I'm just saying that the aid we've provided has mostly not worked.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point, because I think most of this is where the schizophrenic nature of my digital experience becomes quite apparent. Where depending on which app you're on, you have completely different timelines. The world is
Sure.
a completely different place. I think a lot of people are seeing the USAID stuff getting defunded and the funding being frozen, and a lot of times it's just equated into we have stopped caring about the world, and we now want to hurt people. But I think it is a great point. I mean, there Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell will talk all the time about how if you come into a random village and you give a bunch of mosquito nets, and it turns out someone was actually making the mosquito nets before, or many such cases of this class of problem, to say nothing of potential corruption and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting to hear that firsthand perspective, because it's one that most Americans have no idea about, and certainly do not see. They basically just see USAID as the U.S. government doing its best to sort of right the wrongs of the world and repent for its past mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, I know it has nothing to do with Bitcoin mining, so I won't belabor it. But it's that's part of why. First of all, it's the one thing that most people in America don't really care about, because they're not recipients of it, right? So to go after that first, I'm sure strategically it makes a ton of sense, right? But the truth is, it's going to have a big impact on the rest of the world. And I think by and large, though it's painful. It's like turning off a credit card and realizing you have all these bills you didn't realize you had. It allows you to reset things, and I think we desperately need it. So that's what's happening in the States is going to affect us overseas.
And
Hopefully
I guess
some really critical projects, really, good projects don't just get washed out completely. Hopefully there is, I guess the reset is not going to be a complete, wiping clean of the slate. It looks like that might not be the case, but there is some stuff that is just astoundingly, depressing to look at, things that have been happening for decades. Not benefiting anybody and just basically funneling money.
Well, and there's a lot more waste in the U.S. government than can be found in USAID. USAID is actually a pretty small bucket compared to some of the other big buckets.
And I'm
We'll
curious.
see what's next. I don't think they're stopping there.
In end of last year and beginning of this year, just 'cause I think this is something I'm curious about. We talk about it now, or we'll talk about it right after. But I think you live in Kenya now, correct?
Yeah.
What sort of your experience, people's perception of the United States, say end of last year and beginning of this year, how has that changed?
most Kenyans are very excited and wanted Trump to win.
Why is that?
So, again, countries differ, societies differ, but Kenya, up until Obama, had always been very, very strong with Republican presidents. It's a more conservative country, okay, by and large. I can't speak for everything, but so broad brush, right? But Obama, his father was Kenyan, so all of a sudden, Kenyans loved Obama, right? And then, I think when they saw Trump, the first time around, not so impressed. The second time he's coming in, they just were like, yeah, when he's in power, it's better business for us.
Just it's more straightforward. Like they feel like there is like more, I guess, like linear transparency to it. Like,
no, I think it's more like economic opportunities.
Yeah,
that's what they care. At the end of the day, in Africa, across Africa, nobody does anything for free, right? And so you need to eat, and so like what leaders are out there that allow me to earn money to feed my family, right? Both in my country, but also in the most powerful economy of the world. It's amazing to me. It shouldn't be maybe, but it's amazing to me how many Kenyans know so much more about what's going on in the political world of the U.S. than Americans do. They really pay attention because it matters to, they feel like it matters to them because of the outsized influence of the shadow of the U.S. across the world.
Well, and I guess I wonder if the Belt and Road Initiative and some other, like the shifting geopolitical landscape, where maybe like, if there are more spheres of influence potentially. There's more axes of power in the world today than maybe there were 20 years ago. I want, and it certainly seems like China's been investing a ton of money in Africa, as we just seen with this like Ethiopian dam. It does feel like maybe the geopolitics that we're all reading about in the paper are actually having like they hit very, very close to home when it comes to like where's the business activity where potentially is investment coming from, and if it maybe 1 year it's coming from China, maybe 1 year it's coming from the U.S. or I imagine that makes one particularly attuned to kind of the shifting geopolitical landscape.
Yeah, when the elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers, right? And Africa is the grass between China and the U.S., right? We sit smack in the middle. We're a flyover country for most people between those two economies, but there's a lot that goes on there with through different means vying for influence or economic power or resources, things like that. Yeah, it's actually pretty intense. And the U.S. has lost a lot of ground in the last 20 years because they won't just invest. They always have to come. People have to come with their begging bowl and beg for aid money. Whereas China is coming with a business first approach, and so people feel like that's a more respectable thing. I can go do business and I can maintain my pride instead of bowing down with my begging bowl in front of me saying, please give me some money, right? And so people don't hate China being there. China brings money, China brings roads, China brings resources. It's not a bad thing.
There's also an interesting that
the U.S. needs to invest, and that's what I'm getting at. Instead of just throw aid money, put real money down and invest. Even if it's an American company, it's fine. Just put real money in.
But and even that vignette, I think maybe says interesting things about unintended consequences of maybe like some of the neoliberal globalist sort of approaches in times where it's like, we'll just the World Bank, USAID, things like this. It paints a very interesting picture of kind of what they're.
Yeah, because IMF and World Bank have to be structured deals with the government. They're not with private companies, right? And so that already changes the kind of value proposition from what the Chinese are offering, which they're saying, hey, whatever works, whether it's a public deal or a private deal, we can figure something out.
Less government, more individuals, more Bitcoin, more.